Hi, welcome to Module 1 of our online training. In this module, you will learn about the USDA standardized recipes, as well as our core process for recipe development. So a great resource to use is the participant workbook for the recipe standardization process that the ICN has on their website, and there'll be a link to that here for you. So as you look at this definition of the USDA standardized recipe, ask yourself, what challenges could there be to creating or using these recipes? In addition to time, the skill level of your staff, the tools and equipment you have available, the ingredients that you may have on hand, the perceptions of why are we doing this? The USDA lists 23 categories of information that must be included in a standardized recipe. Measurement, volume, yield, and recipe conversion all present challenges to you and your food service program. So why are these standardized recipes considered a gold standard? And really, the USDA lays it right out. Number one is cost control. You need to be able to control costs in your program so that you have a profitable and economically viable food service program. Customer satisfaction. Your guests, your students, they expect consistency day in and day out. And as they move from building to building, as they may progress through their K-12 journey, if it's white chili in one building, it should be the same white chili in another, just like we have in the restaurant business. The nutrient analysis is another really important part of the standardized recipe process. You need to know exactly what components are there so you can credit them and have that in your USDA reports. Additionally, the predictable yield is a key factor in a standardized recipe. Not only does this help you identify how many servings you get out of a batch of the food itself, it lets you determine your production needs and your staffing levels as you offer these items in your cycle menus. And lastly, a standardized recipe really helps you address at a building level, at a site-specific level, the feasibility to produce this food in your environment. For instance, one building might have a steamer while another does not. So if you have rice, you might have rice that you're going to cook in a steamer in one place or on a range top or in an oven. And it's going to vary by building, the way you go about that. So standardized recipes are really designed specifically for the buildings you're using them in. So yes, it's a complicated process. It can be cumbersome at times. The good news is there's lots of places you can look for help. Again, the ICN has terrific resources available to you. Many of you have vendor software platforms available to you to help. Your food buyer's guide, your recipe analysis workbook, those are just some of the resources out there. Dan's going to get into more tools available to you in Mod 2, but some best practices you can use as well. Look to culinary students, whether they're in your district or in a regional tech center, dietetic interns that you may have. Look at existing recipes and see how you can modify them if they're already standardized, to meet your needs. And then another thing that we'll talk about extensively is use our Cultivate Michigan core process for recipe development. There's lots of great ways you can get help. So what is our core process for local food development? The core process is really a cycle of continuous improvement. And like all systems, recipes are developed through an intentional and iterative process. It begins with preparation and assessing through taste tests and focus studies with all stakeholders, including your students and staff. Gathering feedback, reflecting on it, and making improvements will wind it up. And then you just keep repeating. With more than 8 years of experience developing standardized recipe, Dan and I have developed at least 44 recipes in more than 84 rounds of assessment, and we have offered more than 50,000 taste tests. I'd like to add, in all this process, those 50,000 tastes served, all those recipes we've developed, there is one huge lesson I have learned. You have to include every single one of your stakeholders, and you have to include your students in all these taste tests, because shockingly enough, kids' ideas of what tastes good and what's palatable are very different than adult. And Dan and I have learned that year in and year out, over and over again. So just when all the adults in the room think this is a perfect recipe, the kids go, "Oh, we don't like it. We like that one." And we've always been surprised But I encourage you, let students have that final say. Let their voice be the one that matters. After all, they're your guests and you're serving them.